If you think you have no experience to put on your CV, you're probably wrong. That's usually a labeling problem, not a reality problem. So I will explain the 4 key elements that recruiters look for in every application and how you can level up your weak spots quickly. Hi, I'm Mary. I've spent over 10 years in MBB strategy consulting and Big 4 audit in London, where I was also involved in student and MBA recruitment and mentorship. So here's the thing, you are already more employable than you think. You just don't realize which parts count and why. I'll give you a simple framework in a minute that makes this obvious, but first you need to understand why your no experience assumption is simply wrong. Students tend to have a very specific mental image of what proper experience actually means. Spring weeks, summer internships, a shiny logo on your CV that proves you're legit. And if you don't have that, it feels like you've missed some invisible deadline. Here's how things tend to work in reality. Recruiters can't tell what someone did in their 6 weeks internship. All they see is a title and a company name, and that is not enough to assume the candidate is good. They don't know if that person built financial models all summer or spent 3 weeks trying to get IT access and another 2 sitting in induction sessions. Employers know this, by the way, which is why internships aren't valued for the work as much as people think. What corporate internships actually signal is that another employer ran this person through their application process and didn't reject them. That's it. That's basically a pre-screen, a third-party validation, not a proof of skill. And just to be clear, internships do help. They're just not the only thing that helps, and they're rarely the deciding factor on their own. So when you hear "we like candidates with internships," read it as "we like candidates who already went through somebody else's recruitment process because they are a safer bet." This should not be read as "these interns have learned something magical in their time." Now, even if internships genuinely were about skill depth, would 6 weeks of being at the bottom of the corporate food chain really outweigh 3 years of actually doing things at university? Probably not. So reframe your thinking. Most students already have the experience recruiters need. Those who do succeed in getting graduate job offers just know how to describe it in a way that recruiters recognize. Sports, society, side projects, volunteering, part-time work, all of it counts, but only when it's framed around responsibility, skills demonstrated, and outcomes, not prestige, not vibes. I use a framework called SAIL equals S to help students quickly assess what experience they actually have and whether it is balanced the right way. SAIL equals S breaks your experience into 5 buckets recruiters tend to look for, whether they realize it or not. Stand out, academia, leadership, experience, and then how you bring all 4 together, the story. The biggest mistake students make is overestimating one area and completely missing another. In other words, optimizing one bucket and neglecting the rest. Perfect grades and nothing else, or lots of society activity, but they're not including it in their CV because they don't think it's much. You might have been social sec for your sports team just for fun and never put it on your CV, but in reality your work helped the team morale and performance. Humility is great, but you cannot ignore the concrete positive impact you had on other people. Recruiters aren't looking for perfection, they're looking for evidence and for balance. Strong in 3 areas and okay in the 4th usually beats being incredible in one and empty elsewhere. If this sounds like good news, it should. You don't need to fix everything. You just need to give credit where credit is due and focus on your weakest bucket. And most of the time, improving that bucket takes 1 or 2 deliberate moves. Let's look at each one, starting with the first S. Stand out. The claim here is simple. You need one thing on your CV that makes someone pause instead of skim. This isn't about prestige, rather it's about initiative. Something that you chose to do that most students didn't. That might be running a fundraising event where you had to chase people who didn't reply, playing an instrument well, which took years of practice, or playing a competitive sport and actually sticking with it when training clashed with deadlines, or posting content consistently when no one watched it at first. None of it sounds glamorous, that's the point. Note down one thing that you've done that most of your classmates haven't, even if it feels small. And if you're thinking mine isn't impressive enough, that's normal. Most people underestimate their spike because they lived it. But recruiters didn't. So in the experience section of your CV, write 1 bullet for something that you almost didn't include, and make sure that you explain what you actually did, not just the title. Recruiters read hundreds of CVs that blur together. A spike gives them a reason to remember you. I've seen interviews offered because of one slightly odd but owned project that signaled that this guy has the X factor. The next bucket is the one where students tend to hyperfixate: academia. This is your credibility layer, but for most graduate jobs, academics are a filter, not a differentiator. A solid 2-1 will clear the bar in most cases. A couple of modules vaguely linked to the role you might want to do might help, but there is no guarantee. But remember, for a lot of graduate jobs, the exact degree subject matters less than students think. In such cases, your degree just signals that you're able to handle deadlines and complexity with maturity and sustained effort. You don't need a first unless you're targeting something extremely selective or extremely academic. You need evidence that you can perform consistently. Chasing marginal grade improvements at the expense of everything else is a trade-off and not always a good one. And if you're unsure how any element of this video applies to your own situation, ask me in the comments. I read and reply to them all. And if you found this video helpful so far, a like will help it reach other students. Let's move on to the next bucket. It's the scariest one to most students: leadership. This is where CVs get weird because people think that leadership means a title. In reality, it means responsibility. Are you able to make decisions on your own, or do you have to wait for somebody else to tell you what to do? Because managers won't always have the time to micromanage your every move. Recruiters want someone who will take the initiative and run with it if they see an opportunity, because that's what helps their companies grow. Did you organize people and make decisions? Push something forward when it would have been easier to just leave it? Planning a society event where half the committee ghosted you? Running a group project that nearly missed the deadline because your classmates couldn't agree on several things? Mentoring freshers who are new to campus life, being their friend and safety net. That's leadership. Leadership is actually hard to demonstrate in short internships. You're new, temporary, and usually given the safest tasks. Some of the strongest examples of leadership come from university because that's where you're trusted and you have much more autonomy, for better or worse. Leadership signals maturity. It tells recruiters that you won't freeze the first time things go slightly off plan. And now for the bucket that causes way too much panic. Experience. This is the easiest one to fill and the most overcomplicated. Experience just means real-world exposure, situations where you dealt with people, pressure, or consequences. Almost anything can count here. University ambassador roles, volunteering shifts at your local charity shop, where you had to deal with customers and keep an eye on tween shoplifters, or tutoring a GCSE student who didn't want to be there. Maybe part-time jobs where you had to keep it together at 8 a.m. on 3 hours of sleep. These matter because they show action. A lot of interns don't get that. They get to see through onboarding decks and observe meetings. If they're very lucky, they might get asked to take meeting minutes. If an intern did get meaningful work, that's great and they should absolutely put it on their CV. But that work is rarely so complex that a newly hired graduate cannot quickly learn it once they join. Any claims of leading client meetings or preparing deliverables will be taken with a grain of salt and probed further in interviews. So the question isn't, have you worked at a big name? It is, where have you actually done things? What did you learn? And if this bucket feels light for you, that's fixable fast. All you need to start is just one role, one commitment, 30 days of follow-through. And then we bring it all together in the final S, story. You don't need to excel everywhere. All you need is coherence and a storyline that makes sense of you as a well-rounded candidate. A solid academic base to show you can handle complexity. Real-world experience where you build transferable skills useful to your future employer. 1 or 2 leadership moments to show you can think for yourself. And one standout spike to make you memorable. It answers why you without you having to spell it out. If your CV feels underwhelming, it's rarely because you lack experience. It's just because your story isn't clear yet. And for any experience, don't just list responsibilities. Talk about what skills you learned and what are the learnings that you took away. Help the recruiter understand how your skill set will help their company. You don't need to be someone else. You just need to be intentional with what you already have. If this clicked, there is another video that's building directly on this. Subscribe so you don't miss my future videos. Sometimes one small fix can tip the scales in your favor. Keep going and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!